kinds of things. That kind of informs his character, and then why Mike doesn't like him as much because he knows kind of what he's all about. Now, the ending of this film, pretty infamous. It came out in the U.S., had a bad showing, so it was given a new ending for its European release. And they shot this ending about 5 days after the film came out. That's my understanding. And the original ending, the shark is stabbed by the mast of the boat, and he dies. And also Jake dies. Mario Van Peebles dies. But this was changed for the European ending, to which we see now with stock footage from Jaws, the first film, the shark blowing up inexplicably.
I could not explain that to my daughter. My daughter's 8-year-old. She's like, why did that thing blow up? I'm like, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, because it makes sense. In the first one, he's stabbed to death, which is kind of absurd, but he bleeds to death and then dies. And then Jake dies because we saw the shark eat Jake. But instead, in this new ending, we see Jake floating at the end, like, oh man, how are you not dead? I'm like, okay, well, at least you realize the absurdity of what the movie knows that it's gone too far. The roar of the shark. It's from a Tom and Jerry cartoon. And reportedly this was done because the sound designer refused to make an original sound effect because he thought the idea of a shark roaring was ridiculous. So at least someone had some integrity in the making of this.
Wait a minute, sharks can't roar?
Just to interject, I did watch this with the kids because I figured, what's it going to hurt? And my oldest daughter commented and said, why is the shark roaring? And I said, I don't know. Is that like water escaping? I don't know what's going on here. Yeah. A 12-year-old flagged it and said, what?
Very good.
So there you go.
Now, finally, interesting bit of trivia. We joke about Chekhov's fill in the blank, which is, when something is set up, it's paid off at the end of the movie. Every Jaws movie plants the method of how the shark will die in the movie. In the first Jaws, Hooper warns Brody about how the air tank will blow up if you screw around with it, which is how he kills the shark in the first one. And Jaws 2, Hendricks and the old guy out there on their ship, they find the power line under the water, which later Brody uses to electrocute the shark. In Jaws 3, there's a big debate from Crocodile Dundee and everybody about taking grenades down underwater to kill the shark, and that's how they are able to defeat the shark, by setting off a grenade in its mouth. And then finally, Jake is working on a transmitter throughout the movie, which emits a high frequency, and that's how they're able to, get the shark in the end as well in this film. So there you go. There's
Chekhov's
the trivia
frequency.
for Jaws: The Revenge. Chekhov's frequency. Hailing frequency's open. So we did a lot of back and forth in that trivia, more than usual, but I think this particular film called for it. Now,
Yeah.
I'm just going to jump out and say it here, guys, and we can jump into the conversation. I think, because we've kind of talked and we kind of rate things on Letterboxd, we see where we fall on things. John, by the way, we love all your reviews on Letterboxd. Keep it up, my friend.
Thank you.
I think we all like this better than Jaws 3, don't we?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Which, so we're kind of against the grain, aren't we, guys?
Absolutely.
Blew my mind. This movie has a reputation that precedes it, and a lower score on Rotten Tomatoes, I believe. I think that Jaws 3 has 10% and this has 0 or something like that. I don't know if it's a 0, but I'm pretty sure Jaws 3 has a higher Rotten Tomatoes score. But so it's preceded. I hadn't seen it, and I knew how much people reviled this movie, and I watched it the morning after I watched Jaws 3, and I marveled at the fact that there were emotional beats here where I said, wow, yeah, I mean, you mentioned Superman 4 earlier, and it's sort of like that thing where that first 20 minutes or so of Superman 4. Now, keep in mind, I'm discounting the death of Sean at the beginning, which was awful. But like in Superman 4, the first 20 minutes or so, you're like, okay, all right, it's not. Yeah, this is okay. It's not great, but it's okay. And then it all falls apart.
Yeah.
This has these emotional beats throughout the whole thing. I think it's such a fascinating and worthwhile thing to deal with Ellen Brody's pain through her life. And also give her this whole, there's a vestige of this is like one draft away from a really interesting movie.
Yes.
It's so close to a script that could work.
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's an older woman that's leading the film. I really think that that's probably got something to do with it. So, but, I've got my own reasons why I really like this movie a lot as well. But before we get too far, I want to make sure that I don't forget that and say that if Die Hard's a Christmas movie, so is this.
Yes.
Excellent point.
Yes, I had
Excellent
forgotten
point.
that it takes place at Christmas. I'm like, well, I'll add this to the rotation with Batman Returns and
Batman
Home
Returns,
Alone.
Die Hard,
Die
Jaws
Hard.
Revenge. Before we get into the discussion, I also have to tell you why this movie holds such a special place in my heart. And again, I don't hate this movie. I don't rate it really high, but I really, truly do have a lot of nostalgia for this, because way before I ever saw Jaws the Revenge, I spent countless hours, I couldn't even tell you how many, trying to beat the Nintendo game Jaws, which is based on this movie.
Yes.
I loved that video game so much. That was like my favorite Nintendo game, and it's based on this movie. You have to go and collect conch shells, and then you have to, try and you build this electrical thing, and then you got to zap Jaws, and then you got to stab him with the front of the boat, which I could never do. I never beat this frickin' game, no matter how many hours I played it. But oh boy, did I love it! It was a lot of fun, and yes, so it holds a special place in my heart because of the Nintendo game.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm down with that. I mean, that's a valid reason. Like, I get that. That makes sense.
Finally watching the movie and, seeing all these things, hearing the sound effect of, the beating heart in the zapper, it was great.
Now, John, I mentioned Superman 4. You brought it up again. Now, and I know they came out the same year, and that was the connection I drew, but I feel like Jaws and Superman the movie are both excellent films. A couple of the best films ever made in my book, right?
Yep.
And Jaws the Revenge and Superman 4 find themselves in similar situations because they're like, all right, we did something different with the third one. We're going to try to make this one more in the spirit of the first couple that people seem to like more. We got a lot of the supporting cast back, and they're really trying, but the budget isn't there, the time isn't there, and it just kind of falls apart. But and that's why it's like, that again, there's all these 4-movie franchises. There's a lot of comparisons you could draw between Superman franchise and the Jaws franchise. But you're right, I felt that. I was like, there was at the bottom of all this nonsense, there is a good core story here. And, ultimately, it's 1987, right? This is the 4th movie in a franchise. They didn't have that much budget, and they didn't want to sit here and craft a masterpiece. They just said, let's get another Jaws out there. Let's see what happens. And that's kind of what the mentality was back then. These days, you have franchises that go movies and movies and movies. You get something like this, and you could really turn it into a real character study of how this a life of death on the sea has affected this woman. They didn't do that in 1987, and this is what we got. But I think that's what really elevates it above Jaws 3 for me, because they were trying to tell a story here, which I'm not sure what they were trying to do with Jaws 3.
Right. No, and that's a great point. And I think there's also another connection with Superman 4, because you have Michael Caine and Gene Hackman at a pivotal moment in their careers. Gene Hackman's trying to keep the magic alive by recreating Lex Luthor. Mm-hmm. And Michael Caine is, granted, at the very least, they have the age-appropriate romance sort of thing going on. But they're still sort of trying to catch that vibe that people have known them for up to that time. That sort of energy that they had as younger men. And it's almost as if these movies are the transition points where they came out of them and said, okay, you know what? I can't really do that anymore. I've got to move on to the next stage of my career. And I think that as a result, if I were to do a double feature at a drive-in, I would have Jaws the Revenge and Superman 4 because it's, it is the great watershed moment for Caine and Hackman to enter into the distinguished statesman sort of phase of their careers.
I can't even add to this because I've never seen Superman 4.
Oh, now that's a debate. Is Superman 4 worse than Jaws the Revenge? And I will say authoritatively, yes. Yes, I will state that 100% of the time.
But it's Christopher Reeve as Superman, John.
That's fine. That's all well and good. But trust me, as absurd as the shark stuff is with the roar and the this and the that and Mario Van Peebles' character and everything, nothing is more absurd than Nuclear Man. Okay? Nothing is more absurd than must kill Superman, but first
I
have fun. Yeah, nothing's worse than that one.
So, John, definitely, we've established that when we do Superman movies on this, you will be our guest. I'm looking forward to that.
Please, please, please.
But really, though, I mean, as much praise as we're giving this movie, because we feel like, okay, it's overly criticized, I think. Like, it's not good, but it's not the worst film of all time, which a lot of people say. So I think that's why we're kind of showering it with praise right now. But let's be real, this is a bad film.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
And to see Jaws, arguably one of the top 10 films of all time, to see where the franchise has gone to here, it's like, oh man, right?
That is a steep decline.
A steep and rapid one.
Yeah, we all we disagree on where that rapid decline begins, but we all agree that the other ones are kind of in the same spot. 3 and 4 definitely. I like Jaws 2 a lot. I think it's a really fun movie, right? So
you're not alone in that. I was I was berated by my friend Joey, who enjoys Jaws 2, for my review of it. I shared it with him. I spoke to him about it, and he chastised me for my harsh review of Jaws 2. And so you are definitely not alone. Jaws 2 is, to keep the Superman comparison going, a lot of people really enjoy Superman 2, and I'm one of those people that does not. And so totally valid take on it. Sure.
Yeah. See, Michael Caine's character really does not work for me in this movie. He's too, I don't know, I don't like his character, and he's so pivotal to the movie. Like he's trying to be this charming guy, and he's just not.
Well, he was from a different movie, it seemed, wasn't he?
Yeah. He's supposed to be like making this woman fall in love with him and stuff, and he's supposed to be there to be helping her get over her problems and be supportive and stuff. But I'm like, I just don't buy that this guy's charming. Like, he's just annoying.
But he's Michael Caine, and I think that's why it works. Like, if he was a different actor, but it's only because he's Michael Caine. And also, I find it amusing. He was it was a thing with him. He tells all these stories. It reminds me of Alfred. He's like, when I was working in Burma. It reminded me of the stories he tells Bruce Wayne in the Dark Knight trilogy. He's telling about, like, we were in the jungle, and I don't know. Like, to me, that's what it worked. But if I remove my affinity for Michael Caine, I would probably come to the same conclusion as you, Brandon.
I don't really care that much about Michael Caine. Like, whatever, he's Michael Caine. I don't know. I don't care about him as an actor. So maybe that's why. But I mean, like, the other greatest faux pas in this movie is that sweater that Lorraine Gary wears and those shoulder pads in that sweater. Like, what is up with that?
Very
like,
80s.
80s fashions, man. 80s fashions. I remember the shoulder pads and the hairstyles.
She's in Jamaica. The Bahamas? Why does she have those sweater on?
Because it's Christmas.
Because, as somebody who lives in Florida, I can tell you that people
She's visiting. She just came from winter. You're not wearing a sweater.
I get what you're saying, but people who are a little bit older tend to have circulation issues where you would be amazed. Down here we're in a tropical climate, and it hits 60 and people are wearing like parkas, and it's like, what the hell is wrong with you? But then you realize that they're just colder than average.
But I don't know. But again, like, this is such a weird thing to get hung up on. But she's visiting. I remember when I was a kid and I went to Vancouver for New Year's, and it was 0, and I was walking around in a t-shirt because I'm from Saskatchewan where it was minus 40. Okay, because I'm visiting, and I understand. I thought it was funny that everybody's walking around with jackets and they're cold, but they are also used to the warm weather because they live there. Lorraine Gary is visiting for a couple of days a place from the winter where there is snow on the ground. She would not be wearing a sweater in the Bahamas.
Maybe the shoulder pads had ice in them.
Maybe.
And it kept her cool.
That is a weird thing to get hung up on, but honestly, it takes me out of the movie when I watch it. It really does. I'm like,
it's okay. I still don't know why they have a rusted out Jeep with weeds growing in it in their front lawn. That doesn't make sense to me. Well, not that they have a lawn, but right in front of their door, they have this like old rusted out Jeep, and it's like, maybe move it. I don't know. You've lived there for a while. It could be an idea to move it so that your child doesn't get tetanus or something. I
want to go to the Bahamas so bad every time I watch this movie.
That's a nice place, man. It's nice.
I went there once. We took a cruise, and we were there for like a couple hours. That's it. So, like, oh, I would love to go back.
Well, to get us back on track and connect to a movie franchise that's not Jaws